We operate at about 30 million pounds annual revenue. We are working in Australia, in the US, in the UK. We're also a couple of countries in Europe. Of course, we had a little bit of a stall in 2020, but the growth then focused more on franchising. But that's the scale of the company. I think we do 400-500 jobs a day. We've got thousands of cleaners on the platform, as well as thousands of people out doing jobs. So we're out in 500 homes in London alone every single day. So it's not a small little company.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today is going to be a real good one. We've got Rune Sovndahl, co-founder of Fantastic Services, the UK's one-stop platform for home and office services, and an operator who scaled from 2 laptops and a sofa to tens of thousands of monthly customers, 50 plus services, and a franchise engine. We'll dig into the whole growth system behind this incredible business. Welcome to the show, Rune.
Thank you so much, Chris and Nick. It's amazing to be here. Or should I say fantastic?
You've said that before.
Rune, thanks for coming on. We're going to dive into how you grew this, the story behind that. But to start, can you give us a sense of how big the business is, the current size?
Okay. The business now, we are 16, 17 years in. We operate at about 30 million pounds annual revenue. We are working in Australia, in the US, in the UK. We're also a couple of countries in Europe. Of course, we had a little bit of a stall in 2020. There was some cough that went on. I don't know if anybody heard about it, but that stalled it a little bit. But the growth then focused more on franchising. But that's the scale of the company. I think we do 400-500 jobs a day. We've got thousands of cleaners on the platform, as well as thousands of people out doing jobs. So we're out in 500 homes in London alone every single day. So it's not a small little company.
That's awesome. Okay, so how did you get started with this then?
Well, this started with I was the marketing director of a company called lastminute.com. I was doing the international marketing. This was just about when Airbnb and Uber and these kind of stuff started. And I was looking for first. I had a problem. So back then we all lived in these leaseholds, and landlords were trying to get the most money out of you as possible, because if you had done something to the carpet, we're gonna redo the carpet. So I was desperately looking for someone to come and do carpet cleaning. And I typed in carpet cleaning, Islington. I lived in back then, and it's like nothing came up. And then I called the companies, and it was like ridiculous how I couldn't make a booking and I couldn't find a price. And I called 2 of them or something else, and they didn't turn up. And I was like, then a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've got this friend who's got some carpet cleaning. He's doing something for Barclays or some other bank. I think it was Lehman Brothers. He's got some carpet cleaners. They'll come and help you." Turned up, and then I had a word with him, and I was like, okay, I'm in this consumer marketplace. You're in this business-to-business marketplace. And I was like, why has nobody done this? Why is there no pricing? Why can't you just click a button and via an app or via a website? Why can't you just get carpet cleaning, and see what time they're going to arrive? And, like this. This was just when Airbnb was starting, and it was the same time as Uber. And I'd just come back from San Francisco, and I noticed that there was a huge change in the internet. This is 17 years ago, right? Trust, right? So you could book something online. Before that, it was all cash in hand, and you had to see them, and the guy would turn up. Now nobody cares anymore. You got DoorDash, somebody's coming, or we got a cleaner coming here and doing the dry cleaning. Like, we don't know. Everybody trusts that. That was not the case 17 years ago. So we had to work around that. And that was how the idea was started. And then, we started that with, I launched the website, and my business partner was on the phone, taking some of the first calls, and then it just skyrocketed from there. I mean,
what were the first? Sorry, go ahead.
Not by complete luck. Yeah, not by complete luck. I mean, my first things was, and I've also written in the book, is the number one is be where your customers are looking for you, right? It's like they're looking at you in Google Places, they're looking at you in Google, looking at you. Back then it was the yellow pages. So we had a company called 1-888 Carpet Cleaning. That was just the phone number. No company existed. You know how it was. It was directory, business back then. Yeah.
So with the first service you were offering, they were all around cleaning? And where
Yes,
did you
it was.
initially launch the business?
Well, it was in London. I mean, based on, from my sofa in Islington and Anson lived in Maida Vale back then. So it was like from there, just a laptop. And then I sat and coded the first website, sent it off to some guys in India to build a script that rolled out more pages. And yeah, that was it. So, and that in the first year did 1 million in turnover. Just
Wow.
to give you an idea. Yeah.
The first year, 1 million in turnover.
First year, 1
Okay,
million in
so
turnover.
that's a great place to start.
Yeah,
That's nuts.
I left my job. Yeah, exactly. It was just like a hobby. We're just gonna just do this stuff here, and then from then on, it was like it became crazier and crazier. Like the stuff we developed and software developed and everything else it became crazier and crazier.
Wow.
So
Let's
we
dive
launched.
into where those first customers came from. You mentioned trust was an issue. So where are the first customers coming from? How did you get over that first initial, trust barrier?
I mean, we were in an industry where, like, I analyzed it quite well, and in this stuff here, and that's why we became so good at the franchising part, because we can launch a cleaning company anywhere in the world, right? Because it's the same 5 things that does. One is be discovered where the customers are looking for you, whether it's, having a sticker on your van and so forth. We have a whole book on internally exactly how to grow it. So it was like, have a sticker on the van, make sure you have a brand name that people trust, make sure you've got your Trustpilot, your Google reviews, your Yelp reviews, every single thing there in order. Make sure you are where they're looking for you, whether they're looking for Yelp, Gumtree. Back then it was Gumtree. It was make sure you get found, and then make sure you answer the call. That was quite surprising. As I said, my first initial stuff was like, nobody's answering the call. The second one was being able to do accurate pricing. And we could do that with a system. We sat down and calculated, it's like, how much it's going to cost. So we could do accurate and promise a price. And then, like very, very rarely, it's about 4 or 5% of jobs now that gets adjusted at the end. Because I found it very frustrating, this thing of, oh yeah, you can book someone, they come out, and then they argue with you and say like, oh, but you've got 5 more rooms. And I was like, that's not going to work. It's like, imagine you book an Airbnb and you turn up and there's by the way, if you want to use the light switch in that room, it's going to be another. It's like, sorry,
Yeah.
but are we Ryanair? Yeah, do you want to pay for the toilet, right? So we wanted to be quite transparent on prices. And, the third one was, and that was actually harder than we thought, when we started 17 years ago, was doing a good job, right? Doing a good job, in a growing market, because it's not like there was thousands of people we could just get and suddenly they were good, right? We looked at all the other, there was a lot of startups coming up. There were marketplaces and they failed miserably. Like they had enormous amount of funding. They were really paving the way and everybody wanted a cleaner, but they missed one thing. Is like, not everybody can just turn up and do the job, right? There was I'm not going to say the name, but Air something about, doing tasks and this stuff here and a couple of other things. And it's like, it's just a random amateur turning up. Their handyman didn't have a screwdriver. There's another one with something with rabbit. It's the same. Now they're getting a little bit more professional, but it's still an amateur turning up, and they don't even have a ladder. So if you call one of our handymen, they have a ladder, they have everything else, they have the screwdriver. It's like, our handymen are builders, construction workers with a drill, and like they're prepared. They've done this stuff. Like they're trained, they're vetted. I always looked at it a bit like eBay versus Amazon. Like eBay is great for very cheap things, and there's a chance it goes wrong in some ways, and Amazon is more like, well, you're buying it and then giving a promise. So we looked at the Amazon model and we're buying it and giving a promise. And that was what created the trust, and that made people come back.
So how did that sort of vetting process and having people, like you said, that could turn up with the right tools, how did that look in the early days, and how does that look now?
Well, now we're automated. We've got a system. It's called ServiceOS, which is very good on onboarding and very good on field management and checking where they are and everything, location. In the beginning, it was like little groups of people, and then it was on the job training with others, just seeing how good it was. And then one thing that is still a big thing in marketplaces, like, do you let the customers vet this, right? eBay is very much, it's the customers that vets it. If you get one bad review, you're off. This stuff here, we sometimes make sure that they get an extra chance because maybe they just need an adjustment of what they're doing. So it is an on-the-job thing, and that's where the franchising came in. We found the quality became better when we did the franchising because there's an owner who's local to the area. So like in Oxford, they're doing an amazing job. In Manchester, we're doing an amazing job as well. And we got franchisees who's doing an amazing job. They're on the ground, right? We give them all the system, all the know-how and everything else. And like if you want to run a cleaning company, if you want to make money and do that franchising stuff where you don't have to invent all the things that I spend time inventing, so then that's in a box, but you're the one on the ground there. You're the one seeing them. You know them in person. And that's a big difference from a marketplace where it's just like, here we are, random people, what's going to happen? All right. So that's why we chose that model.
So now you have franchisees and they know what they're doing. They're handling that. When you first launched, how did that look? Are you like running out there and doing the cleaning? Did you get the cleaner in place? Like, how did you actually approach that of like, I'm going to take on the orders. I've got to find someone to go deliver the work.
I mean, we did a lot of stuff of delivering. I mean, first of all, we were lucky that my business partner had a couple of cleaners beforehand. And then what we did, we worked with some guys who had it. And we said like, well, we're going to be growth and everything else, and you guys be the delivery and the service level. So we were quite lucky in that. And then that was how we started it. But in the beginning of the stuff, I was answering phone calls as well, finding out what's the pain points, what's going wrong, what is the service actually, redesigning it. We were at a level where we even had the app developer going out and working for 4 to 5 days with the cleaner, finding out that, hold on, while they're driving, they can't reply to that. So that has to be done this way in the app. And I mean, the amount of things. So it's an operational business that's extremely hands-on. I mean, I think that's why we succeeded and why we're still around and why we've got the greatest system there is, because, it's not something that you can just type into and write code and you got this stuff, because the amount of little tiny things that's in there, like how do I know that the third job of the day is going to be delayed by the first job of the day, right? Those kind of things. So I'm informing the customer so I can maybe find a replacement by that time, so that instead of disappointing 6 customers, I only disappoint maybe 1 or 2. Right? Those kind of things is like, how do deliver that consistently? So there's a lot of, like real time in there.
I'm really interested to know more about the transition that you decided to make into a franchise model. So when I was at university, I worked at Subway. In my 3rd year at university, the guys that owned the franchise at the Subway that I worked on offered me to come and invest with them, but I would have had to have left university. I decided against it because the numbers didn't look quite right and I wanted to get my degree and whatnot. But we know franchises can be great models, but there has to be like margin for the franchise owners. So when you made that decision, were you confident that it would scale in a way that kept everybody happy? Were there growing pains to that? How did that transition into that model look?
There was a lot of growing pains. I mean, and I looked at a lot. I mean, this is why I decided to spend, almost 2 years to write the book, because I started interviewing franchise owners and franchisees in the US. I started looking at it. And I also know that in the UK, franchising is not the most popular, exactly for that reason. It's a different game in the US. It's a different game in Australia. And there was a lot of things that can go wrong and will go wrong. We looked at it from a completely different angle and said, like, franchising is what the legal structure is. And then we looked at it, how do we do it? So there was a lot of traditional franchises, and there's a lot of traditional franchises out there, and they're charging a ton of money for the franchise. And we're not charging that kind of money. We're charging maybe 1/3 of what they're out there on the packages. We looked at how does it work for the actual franchisee so they can replicate what we did in the growth phase, right? Because, like I come from a marketing background, so I know from bootstrapping along with the digital stuff, because anybody can spend 5 million on marketing, but can they make a business run on it? And that's the sort of journey you have with a franchise. Subway is a very well-known brand, right? They're very well-known. There's a couple of other American franchises that are very well-known, so they can demand a premium for that. But when you look at the unit economics, is it worth it, right? And that's what we always look at. Is it worth it for the franchisees? And yes, we have franchisees who it's not worth it for. They didn't fill in all the 7 things that we have to do. And if you don't follow that process, it's about a 2-year process where, it's not a business where you just go, bam, here's my money, right? But if you follow the process, I do know franchisees who are on a boat and haven't been back in the UK and still run about 4 or 5 areas,
Wow.
So there is a model in it and there is a way in it, but it's not a 1 year, it's a 2 or 3 year before it starts becoming to that level. And there are franchisees who think they're putting in the time, but they're not putting in the right time. And that's where we really try to say, like, well, this is what's important, and try to iterate that. This is what's important. This is your community. This is your area. If they fail to do that and go like, yeah, but we expected XYZ from PPC, or, everybody can spend money on Meta. Sorry, but the CPA is too high to run a sustainable business in that way. And you haven't generated the monthly recurring revenue on this one. Yeah, but you were supposed to give us. It's like, no, you're supposed to. All factors matter in, right? And I was like, I'm so lucky that I've seen marketing from before the internet, right? I've been in marketing from before the internet. So I know that, like there are things that still works, and it's like, it's old and it still works. And it's like, I even hear in the US SMS is coming back, right? It's like, wow, okay, yeah, I haven't stopped it, So it does that make sense, right?
Yeah.
So follow that stuff. And it's, no, but we're not going to spend £200 on that. Well, then you're not gonna, like that's the money you're gonna make, 3 years down the line, and that's how you grow. So looking at the unit economics. And then there's, of course, like there's also the things. COVID was a big surprise to a lot of people, right? There were certain things that was incredible for, and it worked really well, and removals was going through the roof. Now it seems everybody's running a removal company, and there's a big platforms with millions in it, and it's like they're not making profits, and the drivers are not making profits, and it's like, okay, well, now we have pivoted that, and our units on that, what we're doing, are doing well, So like it's a teamwork, and that's what we wrote, and I wrote in the franchise book. It's like, it's a teamwork, right? I've got 35 experts in that sector who knows this stuff, who feeds back and says like, we can change this, and then suddenly the 34 others who hadn't seen the change sees that. And what other business does that? Like, there will always be a need for services. The question is, are you working with the best tech and the best guys in your peers to keep you running, right?
Yeah, that's. I'm curious, how did you get to this point of franchising? Because I think international expansion that's got to be a tricky thing. When did you decide that was the right move? Had you already moved to the franchise model at that point? How did you know it was time to expand beyond the UK?
Well, Australia was a bit of a random act. It was like, we walked into the office and go like, we have this big office with a call center and people sitting there, and we have desks and stuff here, but at 8, 9 o'clock, it's empty, right? And we had a friend in Australia who was like, okay, well, why don't we just launch a website and see what happens, So that was how Australia happened, It was like, okay, we launched the website, and then it was like, okay, we already have the computers, we already have the stuff now, so now we just made a night shift, right? Because we were paying for the office, then we made a night shift, and that's how Australia came about, And also because there's seasonality differences, right? Because remember, we're bootstrapped. Right, I think we're one of the few who can say that we're bootstrapped in that industry. There's one other company in the UK who's in London I think they got £1 million or something. We didn't have £1 million when we started. I think we had about £3,000. And then that was it. We both had full-time jobs next to it, right? So that's about what we had when we started it. So it's a different story. We had to write the first few websites. So I think we understand the business better. I think we understand the next steps and so forth. But the international expansion was actually, we still get calls. I get calls now internationally say, can we open in this one, this one? We had a lot of stuff from Africa, which is quite interesting. We have a lot of stuff from, the Middle East, and we have other countries where they, and we are changing the model now, because in the beginning it was like, oh, well, we want to run the same franchise. It's going to be this way. And it's like, well, hold on. Well, we can open it a little bit more than what a traditional franchise can, because we're still private. So we can play around with the models in different countries. There's countries where it runs completely different than it does centrally, because our software can just switch over. Our software, it's white labeled. It works on a couple of other companies as well. So it's like, okay, so it can do a lot more than normal franchise software. So we get the requests. They come in from everywhere, and it's like, yeah, I want to run this and this. I want to be a master, or I want to be an area developer. I want to be an operational, right? We've got 3 levels, which is what makes it different. We've got a master, which is a country. They're taking over this stuff here. Then we've got an area who's developing the area, finding the operating franchisees that does it. So, and then we got the one man, the working franchisee, right? So, our platform is very well suited for expansion that way.
Okay. So that first expansion into Australia, that was with a franchise, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Okay.
That was the
first time. That was the first time we actually heard the word franchise, because in the UK it's like, you said it yourself, Chris, right? It's like in the UK we're like, oh, franchising is this and this. I'm like, I was the same as you. I said like, well, franchising, isn't that kind of a scam? I was the same. And it took me a long time to use the word franchising, and I use it in the way that, and that's why I wrote the book about it, right? Saying like, there's a lot of amazing things you can understand from a franchise that allows you to scale, right? But if the franchise is geared towards making money on the sale, then they're not necessarily running the right business. If they're geared toward understanding that the royalties they get over time accumulates, right? So, and also the choice of doing a franchise, right? I do a lot of consulting on franchises, and there's a lot of, I'm helping a lot of companies with franchising models, because I think we're very pragmatic when it comes to it. It's like, yes, it's a word and it's a name, but international expansion, you got the choice of, raise 100 million, I'll go out and take America, right? Or I can go out and raise this. But the fundamental comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? Is it a long-term run? Or is it a short-term run? Or are you trying to build something that, like, we going to build? I think it's 1,000 millionaires we're gonna be building to make it $1 billion company. And we've got a few of those guys already, in the process. Are you trying to go out there for the sake of, well, I can't raise the money or so forth? Or are you trying to build a community of small business owners who are actually really fun to work with, because they're going through the same journey? And it's like academy, our fantastic academy is quite interesting. And it's like, even if you, let's say, make it moderately well, and you do, after 3 years, you decide, 4 years, you decide to sell, you're getting your money back, but you've also got an MBA in running a business, and there's nothing you can't run after 4 years in that. And that's actually part of the game as well. Like, there are people who are sitting on a boat enjoying their lives, and then there are people who are like, well, they're going through the stuff here, and they learn more about themselves, learn more about business. Like, it's a bit like when you go through the Alex Hermosis stuff, right? So our little academy there is like, okay, guys, now we're gonna grow. This is the phase. This is the month we're doing this. I'm in there, and it's like, I'll spend time with them, and I say, like, listen, we got to do this, this, and this. You follow the rules. You go through this stuff here. You're in boot camp now. Well, that's the fun part. Then they go through a slough where it's like really hard. They're not recruiting enough. They're not getting enough. And it's like, and that's the journey, right? And that's part of it. And this is also the fun part of it, right? And we're there along the way. We're not gonna come and hold their hand, but we're still with them, right? Because they can't fail, because then we fail, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's their business, and they're running it, and they decide, how much they want to make out of it. We would also want them to do better than they sometimes think they can. And then suddenly they surprise us and go like, yeah, 3 months later, it's like, yeah, well, I've done it, and then they come back and you just see the numbers. It's like, wow, that's what I enjoy about the franchising, rather than a lot of the other things.
Nick, for context, Slough is where the UK office is set, so it's pretty.
Oh, okay.
Grim.
Some of these British words are just like, I know what you're talking about.
Rune, when I was, I think it's so true what you say about the franchise model, especially from a UK perspective. So just to correct me if I'm wrong, the first actual franchise that you did was in the Australian market, or did you implement the franchise model in the UK? Or you did it in Australia and then brought it back to the UK?
Yes, because that's where we learned about franchising. Right? Because
okay.
I looked at the franchising in the UK, and it's grim, great companies, even the Americans that comes in there, and it's like, I don't know who buys them, right? And there's not that many who buys them. It's like, who buys them? So we wanted to say, like, what can we do that's, like, I wouldn't say sexy, but, interesting, and actually create a business where, it's like, we all know that you have to do X amount to do a McDonald's, but what are you doing? You're buying a job, like here, you're buying a job for about 3 years. Right, then it starts to becoming. Then you get to the level of where you learn to delegate. But the first 3 years is work, right? And I try to say that as honestly. It's 3 years work, but then you're starting to delegate, and then you can open the number 2, number 3, number 4. But it's 3 years of work, right? But compare that with 3 years of work in anywhere managerial position somewhere, and it's like, sorry, but after 3 years you own it, and you can sell it, and you can get your money back, and so forth. So
in that time before you went the franchise route, as you're growing in the UK, you're moving into new markets. One of the things I hear that's extremely challenging is finding operators. Like if you're not on the ground there managing those people, can you talk about that? How challenging was it to actually expand in the UK before you got to that franchise point?
Well, I mean, that's why we couldn't expand much outside of London. In London, it was absolutely fine to find it. But outside of London, it was like, whoa, like it was crickets. And it was like, you put up a job ad and, like where the guy's working and this stuff. Yeah, that's why I do think our model is so strong compared to, like, say, pure marketplaces. Right, because we also turn up. Like the marketplace can promise the stuff, but it won't turn up. But when you got a franchisee in between there, yes, it eats a little bit of our overall top profits, but we actually turn up, and that's why we're alive. That's why we still stay there. That's why we're 17 years rolling. Versus the platforms come and gone. Spent 30 million and gone. In 5 years. Like, okay, great. Where are you now? What are you delivering? Right? I just bought a platform that was running for 7 years in the UK for $1, right, or for £1, right? the first time, I mean, like finding staff is incredibly hard. I mean, like we started before Brexit. So there it was very easy. It was like the easiest of the easiest, right? It was like there was an abundance of, Eastern European immigrants. There was abundance of everything else that came to work. And they would turn up and they would do their work and everything else. So before Brexit, it was extremely easy. After Brexit, there was a time with COVID and everything else where it's like it's just too much in the past, right? Labor is there. And it helps being a brand where you can trust it and so forth. But number one thing is that having a person that manages a franchise owner, because the ones who are really good at people succeed a lot more than the others. So it's one of the number one things in the franchise is like, are you good with people? Because they come into the office, not every day. They come into the office maybe once every 2 weeks and they see them and the stuff here and they're on the phone or they're talking to them. And the ones who are good with people tend to hold them on. Most of the things saying is like, if you can keep them, it's better than recruiting them. So finding the first ones was hard, but once you've got them, it's like, well, suddenly they can bring 4 friends. It's very interesting how that works, right? So it's very hard if you treat people bad. If you treat people okay, if you're okay with this stuff here, if your systems are working, there's always a bit of frustration in the work. It's like, there's very few who woke up and say, I want to be a cleaner. So we try to make it as good as possible to be there and to be part of it. And that's what we try to instill with the franchisees.
That's awesome. Yeah, really, really fascinating. Rune, before we jumped onto the call, you mentioned about some of the early growth strategies. You mentioned something about $50 ads, multiple accounts. I'm wondering if you could share that story with us. I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, there's a saying, necessity makes someone knit clothes, right? Because we didn't have funding, because we didn't have this stuff here, and these other guys, they've funded, millions of this stuff here. At one stage, Wired magazine had these, I think it was actually £150 for new accounts on Google. When you sign up, you got £150 when you spend £150. So that was instant. To me, was a 50% discount on ad spend, right? So remember, these guys were funded with like 5 million or spending, 100,000 a month. So it's like, how can I do that? I don't have the money to spend that. So we sent the cleaners out to buy every single Wired magazine for about, we sent them out in the car, and suddenly we had the office full of Wired magazines, and this stuff here. We pulled them up. I had two of the guys. I had pictures of it. It was funny sitting in the office. One of them actually runs a completely advertising agency, but that was her first job, was just sitting there, putting the stuff here, taking a picture of it, putting those numbers down, and then entering it, setting up a new AdWords account, right? So when Google calls, I'm like, oh, that's great. Your agency is the fastest growing agency. So hiring all these getting all these local companies on this. Yeah, sure. And then 3 months later, this stuff is like, no. This only works if you spend it 3 months. That's why the rules are like that now. So that was one of the ways. Then there was another way, like at one stage, there was a couple of things we called it Ruin the Internet, which was, I'm quite a techie, so we spent a lot of time coming up with new ways of doing websites and publishing stuff. One thing I'd learned from my time in the travel stuff of publishing multiple things. At one stage, it was at that level where we were publishing, I think, 200-300 websites a week. On this stuff here, and then that also changed how Google works. So there's a couple of times where I said, like, some of the things we've done has made changes in the algorithms, because that was where it went. So and I think that's, I mean, like, I have one thing in saying is, like, if you haven't been banned in SEO, then you're not doing SEO, then you're just playing it safe. Right. So that's one of my sayings. So my guys is like, okay, well, you can't be branding the main brand, but we've got these you can play with. And, that's not to say they do anything, this stuff here, but it is just a database we're playing up against. And the database is smarter, but it's just a database we're playing up against. So that's kind of the attitude. We're playing up against the database. It's about being found, don't do any fraud or anything else, but anything else is like, okay, well, what can you do technically? Can you publish 1 million pages and the stuff here? I mean, at one stage, I think we launched one website with 3 million pages. It was crazy. It's like completely useless, right? But that was 3 months where it worked until Google goes, like gone,
But
Test
you
it and break
mentioned
it.
one key thing there. You said not doing it on the main domain or not with the main brand name. That, I think,
Yeah.
that's essential. Like, if you're going to try all these
Yes.
things that are gray hat, black hat, do it on a separate entity so you don't burn your own domain. That's the most important part.
I'm used to working. I still do a lot of SEO consultancy, even for big corporate brands. It's the same thing as like what you'd be surprised about is how many, like in travel, for example, is owned of the sites you see are owned by the same mother entity, but are running as separate companies. But they're owned by the same holding companies and everything else. For that reason, I said like it's better to have. We call it ruin the internet. It's better to have ruin the internet like better number 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 positions than number 3 or number 2 at times. It's not the same anymore. It's a different game, and now it's about stability, it's about profile, it's about delivering, and so forth. So, but that's a whole different. We can talk a lot about that, But I thought the story, I mean, like how we started. I think the most thing that I remember back was like we just never gave up. I mean, the amount of times that a site was banned or something else was done, or competitors came in with so much budget that we couldn't do it. We just never gave up. It was like, okay, well, they're just showing us something new we can do. Right. And I have, now I'm not active in that team anymore. I still oversee it, but my guys in that I have the most respect for, because it's just that attitude. That's the culture. You don't stop us. Right. And that's why we launched separate to this. We launched an advertising agency for others. Right? And now that's in America. It's called Leads to Fame. But that company has the same attitude and culture. It's like, you just didn't give up. Like you get beat up. You get told by this. Anyone who's in growth and anybody who's in marketing and so forth, like I have a couple of years in this stuff here. It's like, you just don't give up. It's like, oh, Google has changed this or Instagram has changed this algorithm. That's just a show for doing it, right? It gets tired. After 20 years, it gets tired, but the culture of this stuff here, you've got a couple of years where it's like, but that's the game, right? So like, if you haven't been banned, if you haven't done anything wrong, you're not trying hard enough, like it's as simple as that, like you're really not trying hard enough if you haven't. And that culture is what stays there. And I'm the same now. It's like with some of the things we're trying with AI. It's like, if we don't get banned, if we don't get, like anything else, just, don't do anything illegal, don't do any fraud, and don't, do anything to, bad to the consumers or anybody else. Then, the number of websites you can launch is there. I mean, but they got so much better. I mean, like if you'd had the tools 20 years ago that we have now, wow, yeah. So it's different, but the same attitude counts, right? Because you have to try it, and that's the game, right? And that's also what we find fun, figuring out how do we publish this? How do we make that user friendly enough? How do you make them understand this stuff? How do you make them click the button faster? How do you make sure that they convert and stuff here? And then most important is like delivering a good service so they come back. And that's in the name, fantastic services, right? So I think a lot of them are 3-bit sites. I think I love the 3-bit sites. It's such a great business model, and some of them are very profitable, but they don't keep the customers. They have to continue. Yes, they're getting very low CPA, but they have to, we keep the customers.
Yeah.
What do you say, Chris?
I was just going to say, yeah, no, that's absolutely, yeah, I totally agree with you. You've got to test it and break it. I love like how you've grown, and I think it's a great business. Just as we wrap up, I'd love to just know, you just touched then on, you said some of the stuff we're doing with AI. So we're obviously in the era of AI. Like what are you doing that's getting you close to being banned or on these AI platforms? What's the interesting stuff there?
I mean, of course, we've already been banned several times on stuff, especially around publishing, right? I think we went away from the publishing part of it because like it turns out to be, I think it's quite futile to just publish and rewriting and so forth. It became quite tired about that about a year ago. I'm more looking at what the software is doing in regards to the customer service and cutting costs and so forth.
Right.
On the growth part of things, I think that one of the things that I'm still in the process of launching more of is about more the auto influencer stuff.
Interesting.
But it's getting caught a lot. So just like I know some guys were a couple of steps ahead, but it lasts 3-4 weeks. It's a whole different game now, whereas we used to have 3 months playground and you could do things. It's 3 weeks, sometimes it's 3 days till the algorithm picks it up. Now it's a different game. It's a different game in that. But the thing that we learned, right, because remember, I'm from the time when I could see every single keyword that came in, every single keyword, right? Google didn't hide anything. There was no GDPR back in the days, right? So I could see everything else. So understanding the psychology of keyword structures, and then adding that to AI in the publishing is probably the most secret, powerful weapon we have, right? Gemini and everything else is taking it over. It's blacking that out. You can do snippets. You get up there, you get suddenly a lot of visibility. But I've had blogs before with 2-3 million views a month or more, and so forth, and it never gave me a customer, right?
Wow.
So well, I mean, it's bottom of funnel stuff mixed with top of funnel is beautiful, and wow, you got the traffic and the stuff here, but bottom of funnel works. Understanding really what true bottom of funnel is, like really understanding that. I think that's harder now because you're not getting the same data in as you did sort of like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you know exactly what keyword converted, like even with a typo, there was no broad match, there was no anything else, like I miss making manual keyword campaigns on Google where there was no broad match, no Google max profits and this stuff here, right? But understanding that allows me to pull out a lot of negatives. It allows me to really optimize. And that's
Awesome.
what AI is very good at. There's a lot of good reading stuff on massive data and chunking that in and applying the right psychology of like, what am I looking for? So I'm advertising for the right thing and looking at bottom funnel. So I'm not wasting my marketing money, because that's what everything is about,
Yeah, getting those customers. Well, Rune, this has been absolutely fascinating. If anybody wants to track you down, where can they find you? If anybody wants to get the world's best cleaner, where can they go to get that sorted?
Cleaners is on fantasticservices.com. Me personally, I'm on LinkedIn under Rune Sovndahl. Hard to spell a name, but other than that, I'm on Instagram on Rune Entrepreneur. And that's it really. Best agency right now that I'm working with and doing work with is Leads to Fame. Very AI focused and so forth. And the best software for managing and operating any service-based business or field management is ServiceOS. I mean, like, you could launch a clone of Fantastic Services with the app for a fraction of what I paid. That company is spun off now. It's like, you can launch it for that. I spend a lot of money on that. You can launch it for a fraction of that on the software.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. Go and spin up for some.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are 2 UK startups that I'm not allowed to disclose that are running on the exact same platform, and instead of spending the 10-12 million I spend on it, and that's another thing. And the final thing I'll say is like, there's a lot of solutions out there, and people like me who'd work with you before you go out and spend 5 million on stuff that you don't need to spend. I mean, I think it's overrated the amount of stuff you had to spend on tech, right, to become a tech company. That doesn't exist anymore. It's very rare that the tech is the actual advantage. In the case of Instagram, yes, it was. In the case of Facebook, yes, it was. In the case of Skype and a few other things, and in the Chat GPT. But where else is it the tech that's the winner versus the amount of customers you acquire, right?
Yeah.
So if you really think about, am I in the acquire customers fastest game, or am I in the tech game? A lot of founders get it wrong and think they're in the tech game, but actually there's 12 platforms already doing this. I'm not in the tech game. I'm in the best way of acquiring 2 people in the marketplace, one the providers and one the customers. I'm not in the tech game, right? And that's why a lot of not a lot, but some really big UK startups are running on the same platform now. So are running on ServiceOS, because it's like, why spend 10 million on building it when it's like, bam, you're on, then you haven't spent the 10 million, you've got that for your marketing budget, because it's the customer acquisition that costs money, right? So that's what I'm working on now. And that's exciting. So it's like, we're doing fantastic over and over again, but different companies, and yeah, it's split off completely. There's a CEO, he's great, and he understands it. So he's like, oh yeah, we'll customize this. And oh yeah, this is great. So beautiful business.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Absolutely amazing. Rune, thank you so much for being such an insightful and great guest. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you on again soon. Take care.
Anytime. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Rune.